my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot. Hey, oh, I'm just like my country. I'm down, tired, and angry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I have seen a thing or two in med college. I shouldn't brag, but modern medicine can really astonish. Maladies like smallpox are being abolished. But out of nowhere comes a zoonotic virus for which we've no knowledge.
It's a different kind of beast, a new type of threat. Every doctor dreads down, leaving more than 1 million dead. 11 months along this pandemic disaster. These Vacville streets get colder with shoulder.
Every burden, every disadvantage we've tried to manage, but without a way forward, we're beaten down and damaged. The plan is to find a cure to change the game. In case you haven't noticed, let me spell out its name. It's the CORONAVIRUS. It's COVID-19.
A vaccine that works most effectively so COVID can strike with impunity. Essentially, it trains your immunity to recognize virus parts with most certainty, activate T and B cells to fight disease, and kill the virus before it can grow with ease.
Victory, we say in parentheses.
Don't be shocked when our history books mention these interventions that fought back infirmity, bring it back our very lives and normalcy.
I'm not throwing away my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot. Hey, oh, I'm just like my country. I'm down, tired, and angry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. It's time to take a shot. I dream of life without a full ED. Every patient will be cared for in their time of need. Waiting rooms, hallways, and no place to be comfortable. Gotta triage while protecting the vulnerable with my shot.
Yo, treat the infectious. We vaccinated safely now with decades of practice. Now MMR and polio are things of the past. We'll have a blast beating this COVID at last. It's gonna take a shot.
But we'll never be truly free until our kids are back at school and blowing out their energy. You and I.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the abrupt stop, but they knew that I love that song, and I love that they adapted it for this moment in time. The Hamilton cast always comes through with exactly what we need to hear. So welcome to our wonderful Pfizer panel on the response to COVID and vaccinations. This week is World Vaccination Week. And so we couldn't have had a more timely opportunity to have this conversation. And I've got to give a special shout out to our summa cum laude graduate of John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Marcus Green, who is the Associate General Counsel at Pfizer and helped us have this moment today that we're having. So for those of you who don't know, John Jay has a special distinction in this COVID pandemic. We were the first college in the CUNY system to have a positive COVID case. And I want to say thanks to my co-moderator today, Dean Ayman El-Mohades, who is a pediatrician and a public health expert, and he is the dean of our School of Public Health at the City University of New York. But because of Dr. El-Mohades' advice beginning at the beginning of March, we were prepared as a community. And when I say as a community, I mean as a CUNY community. So I want to thank you all for being here and being part of this conversation so that we can educate ourselves and understand how we can support each other in getting vaccinations, support our families and our communities in getting vaccinations so that we can all return to the kind of life we've been missing for the last 18 months. I've lost track of how many months it is, since March of 2020. And we will get there because of the wonderful science that all of the folks on this call are going to talk to about with us. And also I want to give a special acknowledgement to Sandra Lindsay, who is a double CUNY grad, who stepped up and was the first person in the country to get a COVID vaccine. And I think it says something that CUNY is at the core of that and at the forefront of this movement to make sure that everyone is vaccinated. And again, I am so grateful for this partnership with Pfizer and for the work that you all have done. Who would have thought, when I review the timeline of when Pfizer started talking about this vaccine, notice I didn't say when you started working on it, when you started talking about it to the country back in March of last year. And here we are, April, a year later, and what is it, over 50% of us now have at least had one COVID vaccine shot. Many of that number have had 2 shots. it's because of your foresight and the work you did early on, beginning in 2018 on mRNA that I know you'll talk more about. But I think that we have all gained some knowledge of biology as a result of what we've been going through, and we look forward to more education tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Dr. El-Mohades, for him to give us a few words of wisdom, and then he will turn it immediately over to Vice Chancellor Richard White, who is representing the City University of New York Chancellery, and he's been a fabulous partner with us in all of this work as well. So Dr. El-Mohades, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Mason. A great pleasure co-moderating with you today. Since the pandemic started, 32 million cases so far, 577,000 deaths and more. Had it not been for the miracle of producing a vaccine so potent and so rapidly, we would be in a different place. Currently, 192 million doses have been administered, which is a miracle. We are looking forward. I am one that has received my shot, actually 2 shots, Pfizer vaccine, and feel like I'm now in a different place. Very proudly, I introduce Richard White, and I give you, Richard, the microphone.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you all for being here tonight. I give you greetings on behalf of our CUNY Chancellor, Felix Machos Rodriguez, and all my colleagues on the cabinet. I want to, on behalf of him, I want to thank all of you and all the experts here tonight, the researchers, the practitioners, the professionals, all of which that helped bring the Pfizer COVID vaccine to the market. Obviously, I thank everyone for organizing, and no small thanks to the leadership of the president of John J. College, Karol Mason, and Dr. Ayman, dean of the CUNY Graduate School of Health. As many of you know, CUNY had joined the city and state's battle against COVID-19 on many fronts throughout the year. We've got 5 campuses that are doing testing and vaccinations. Our 2 main campuses, Medgar Evers and York College, have vaccinated over 200,000 New Yorkers. We've got teams of individuals working on the campuses. Our experts at the Graduate School of Public Health have worked on surveys for tracking it. Our scientists at CUNY have taken the various research projects that have made significant advances assisting in this global project. And we're mostly proud of our students and our active National Guard individuals and our staff that have joined the front lines. 2,500 nursing students at our facilities, 1,000 students that volunteered throughout the New York City health and hospital systems, 2,000 additional CUNY students that were activated to help the vaccines, 3,500 additional CUNY students who volunteered on the vaccination efforts, and our Vax Up campaign led by the indemnable, the wonderful leader that we have, Sandra Lindsay, who'll speak first, or speak after us here, and I'll introduce her here and hear some words from her. But we really continue to prioritize the health and well-being of all of our citizens and our colleagues in the community. So thank you to our panelists, our moderator, Myron Terry, our panelists, Lisa Cohen, Angel Melendez, Melissa Bishop Murphy, and I want to give a special thanks again to my friend, Marcus Green, Vice President, Assistant General Counsel. I know Ms. Marcus Green, the DA alum, when he was a rookie. I know Ms. Marcus Green, the AG alum, when he was there, but we all know Ms. Marcus Green as just a terrific guy. So thank you, Marcus. On behalf of the Chancellor, again, I thank Pfizer for your worldwide leadership and for so many of you willing to continuously give your time and dedication to make this collaborative effort a success by bringing hope for a better and brighter COVID-free future for us all. Now I'm pleased to welcome Sandra Lindsay, a double CUNY grad, 94 and 98, to offer her insights and some words of encouragement. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor White. As a double CUNY alumna, it gives me great pleasure to address my CUNY family today. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the work that you are doing at CUNY to get us through this pandemic. 2020 was the most difficult year of my career. My years of scholastic preparation and experience on the front line and in leadership could not have prepared me for the unimaginable pain, suffering, and death that I saw firsthand as a result of COVID-19. A year ago, thoughts of a vaccine were almost inconceivable. But thanks to the great work of our scientists, we now have vaccines to protect us and our loved ones from contracting COVID-19, becoming severely ill, ending up in one of my ICU beds, and potentially dying. So kudos to the work of the scientists. As you may know, I received the first COVID-19 vaccine outside of a clinical trial. I received 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine and had no complications. As a matter of fact, after the second dose, I was so energized. As that needle pierced my flesh, I just felt like hopeful. As you have heard me mention, like healing finally was here after months of going through this pandemic, grueling days and nights. I just felt so protected, as if I was being wrapped in a warm blanket, and I saw the light. So I can't thank Pfizer and our scientists enough for their diligence in getting us a vaccine to market in less than a year. There are several reasons why I volunteered and was an advocate for this vaccine ever since there were talks about developing a vaccine. First and foremost, I see it as my civic and my professional responsibility to do everything that I can to protect human lives and put an end to this pandemic once and for all. I was also very scared as I saw myself any day in one of my ICU beds. As a leader in my organization, I always lead by example. I never asked my staff to do anything that I wouldn't do. And so I wanted them to see that I was willing to put myself out there because I think that the vaccine is safe. Most importantly, I know that my communities of color were disproportionately affected. And I wanted to instill public confidence that the vaccine has been deemed safe and effective. It is my most sincere wish that everyone who is able to avail themselves of the vaccine will do so. The science has demonstrated that the vaccine can save lives. So I am counting on all my CUNY family today to vax up. I will now turn it over to Marcus Green, VP and Assistant General Counsel of Pfizer.
Good evening, everyone, and special thanks to President Karol Mason, who is just an outstanding leader, continues to put John Jay on the map. If anyone who lives in New York hasn't visited John Jay when, pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, you could see the incredible work before your eyes, just doing a fantastic job and really understanding the importance of public-private partnerships. Pfizer has partnered with John Jay over the last 4 years, doing all sorts of programs related to the role of the Attorney General. And it's been just a wonderful, wonderful partnership. So thank you, President Mason. Thank you, Dr. El-Mohades, for your leadership and your participation. And my good friend, Richard White, Vice Chancellor, thank you for your words of inspiration. Rich is a fantastic friend, colleague, and an outstanding lawyer. And so we appreciate your participation. So I really want to thank all of you for doing what you can to ensure that students and the community at large has all the information necessary to get vaccinated. You know, as our chief patient officer always says that, you know, vaccines alone don't save lives, vaccinations do, right? So you have to, it requires action. And so we thank you. And then obviously a special thanks to Sandra Lindsay for your courage and your leadership. You lead by example and you inspire us all, and we really appreciate that. You know, thank you for your participation and your leadership on Vax Up CUNY. The Vax Up CUNY campaign is outstanding, and I know other colleges will follow suit if they haven't done so already. Over the course of this year and last year, it's been very, very challenging. My colleagues and I have been inspired by healthcare professionals, first responders, all of the trial participants, and so many others, all giving us energy to move forward and to lead our scientists to save lives. Our collaboration worldwide with scientists and so many talented professionals kept our hopes high throughout the many challenges that we encountered along the way. And we're facing another challenge, and that challenge is this, what we call vaccine hesitancy. And that's the challenge of making sure that individuals who are reluctant to get vaccinated have the information that they need to get vaccinated. So with that, I'm now going to turn the program over to my colleague and friend, Myron Terry, Senior Director at Pfizer, who will introduce our panel.
It wouldn't be a call if somebody didn't leave the mute button on, would it? So we'll try that again. So Marcus, thank you very much. First and foremost, to President Mason, I can't say enough how appreciative we are of you and of this forum, because again, this is so important. And as a resident of New York City, I recognize the leadership, I recognize the role that CUNY plays in our city, and I know every day you're making New York City a better place. So I just, from a personal level, I want to thank you and the whole CUNY system. We're excited to have this opportunity today. I just can't share that enough. And I do want to say, I want to echo, and I hate to say this in front of him, but I do want to echo what all the good things folks have said about Marcus. He is a great colleague, and his leadership is particularly evident today, because he was very strong in encouraging all of us to do this today. He made sure we clearly understood how important it is. And with that, I'm excited to share a little bit of information about what we think are 3 really great speakers who are going to bring some great information forward. To all of our folks today, hopefully everyone knows Pfizer was actually founded right here in New York, in Brooklyn. You know, so Brooklyn is our original home. I'm excited to say that we are still here. So New York is our global headquarters. We're currently in Midtown East. And that is, again, that's home for all of us, even though we're still kind of in a hybrid, you know, work environment, but New York City is our home, and we're very proud to claim that. With us today, we've got 3 very distinct speakers we're going to sort of separate our messages. First, we're going to hear from Lisa Cohen, and Lisa's going to give us a little bit of background of how did we get here? How did we get to the vaccine, and what's the current status of the vaccine? Lisa actually leads at Pfizer. She's our public affairs lead for all things vaccine. So we clearly have the right person to deliver those messages. She supports our Pfizer business leaders on our existing and our pipeline vaccines, and also all of our Pfizer's policy priorities as they relate to patient access to vaccines. Following Lisa, we're going to have Angel Melendez, and he is going to talk a little bit about vaccine safety. And unfortunately, he needs to share with us an update on vaccine counterfeits and vaccine scam. Something a lot of us probably have not thought about, but it's a trend that we're seeing emerging, and we're lucky to have him. And at Pfizer, he is responsible for protecting Pfizer's assets. He's responsible, and I'm glad to know this, for protecting Pfizer colleagues throughout the Western Hemisphere. He oversees our investigations on a wide variety of threats and of those assets, including product integrity, investigations to safeguard patient health and patient safety. He also provides strategic guidance to Pfizer's global security operations, our executive protection, crisis management, and all of our facility security programs. Last but absolutely not least is Melissa Bishop Murphy. Melissa, who I'm a little biased about, Melissa actually recruited me to Pfizer many moons ago. Melissa's going to talk to us a little bit today about Pfizer's efforts to educate, to do a grassroots education in some of our community outreach around vaccines. Melissa is currently a senior director of national government relations at Pfizer, and she also has responsibility for our multicultural affairs, particularly within our U.S. government relations organization. She's responsible for regulatory, legislative, public policy matters at Pfizer. And additionally, in Melissa's current role, she also chairs Pfizer's Multicultural Health Equity Collective. So we definitely brought the brain trust today. We've got the folks that are going to bring the message. And with no further ado, Lisa, can you kick it off for us?
I will do that, Myron. Thank you so much. What an amazing introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Lisa Cohen, as Myron said. I lead U.S. Public Affairs for Pfizer Vaccines. And I have to tell you, I was so excited that Nurse Lindsay could join. She is such an inspiration to our vaccines team. We worked night and day, all of our colleagues in vaccines, until that moment when that shipment got to Northwell Hospital and we saw her get that dose. So I'm so inspired by her and by having her on this panel. So today, I'm going to touch on the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine program and our distribution efforts, as well as the importance of building vaccine confidence. And before I begin, I need to read just a short statement about our vaccine. We are still under emergency use authorization. So the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine has not been approved or licensed by FDA, but has been authorized for emergency use under an emergency use authorization to prevent COVID-19 for use in individuals 16 years of age and older. The emergency use of this product is only authorized for the duration of the declaration that circumstances exist justifying the authorization of emergency use of this medical product under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, unless the declaration is terminated or authorization revoked sooner. I'd like to encourage you to review our EUA fact sheet that's available online at cvdvaccine-us.com. So a little bit about the vaccine itself. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is mRNA-based. I know you've heard that. And it encodes an optimized SARS-CoV-2 full-length spike protein, which is a key neutralization antigen. So let me break that down a bit. The mRNA vaccines work differently from common vaccines. Significantly, mRNA vaccines do not contain any virus particles. Instead, they provide a recipe that teaches our own cells to make a part of the COVID-19 virus that is called the spike protein. The idea is stop the spike protein and you can stop infection. A few additional things to underscore. Our vaccine is a 2-dose vaccine administered 3 weeks apart. It's not interchangeable with any other vaccine. It does not contain live virus, and the mRNA does not alter your DNA, but it's transient and it's eliminated from your body. Also, the vaccine is preservative-free. If you're interested in the specific components of the vaccine, you can find that information, again, on our EUA fact sheet at cvdvaccine-us.com. So I'd like to explain how Pfizer and our partner BioNTech have reached this point by touching on a few key milestones of the development process. So just about a year ago, in May 2020, we began the phase 1/2 trial of 4 potential vaccine candidates. In late July 2020, we selected 1 and began the phase 2/3 trial, eventually enrolling over 46,000 participants. That's a lot. We've conducted these trials in approximately 153 sites around the world in 6 countries and 39 states in the US. Our trial participants are ages 12 to 85, and in the US, 30% have racially and ethnically diverse backgrounds. Approximately 40% are ages 56 to 85. Of the 30% with diverse backgrounds in our clinical trial, 13% are Hispanic, 10% Black, 6% Asian, and 1.3% Native American. On December 11th last year, the FDA granted EUA for the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, the first in our country for a COVID vaccine. The next day, the CDC's ACIP recommended our vaccine for persons 16 years of age and older under the terms of the EUA. And a day later, we began the first shipments of our COVID-19 vaccine. I wanted to note that the approach we've taken in bringing the vaccine to this point on an advanced timeline is not one that cut any corners. Our team has ensured that the science is driving the process and that we can meet FDA's rigorous regulatory standards. The clinical trial has been a continuous study with regular discussions with regulatory officials along the way. This allowed decisions to be made in near real time, and that continues today. So what's next? We've recently started a clinical trial of our vaccine in pregnant women and a clinical trial in children 11 years of age and younger. We expect readouts of these clinical trials in the second half of this year. In late March, we also released important top-line results from the pivotal COVID-19 vaccine study in adolescents ages 12 to 15. In early April, we submitted these data to FDA for inclusion in the EUA, and we now await FDA's decision. In addition, I know that you've all heard a lot about variant strains. So we're continuing to study in vitro, so in the lab, and real-world data related to these emerging variant strains, and the results are encouraging. So in late February, we announced a new study of the safety and immunogenicity of a third dose or a booster dose of our current vaccine. This would allow us to understand the effect of a booster on immunity against COVID-19 that's caused by current variants. We've also just begun a study of a booster dose that's more variant specific. And what we're going to do next is continue to stay in close touch with regulatory authorities on this work and ensure that we're on the same page with them in the coming months as they make decisions about boosters. On April 1st, we also released additional efficacy and safety results from our phase 3 landmark trial, and that built upon what was announced in the fall, and that was the basis of our EUA. This data now positions us to submit a BLA, so we would seek a full license from the US FDA very soon. Let me switch gears and talk about manufacturing and supply. So at Pfizer, we ramped up this work last year at the same time that we conducted the clinical trials. That's really unusual in our business to make that type of at-risk investment before knowing if the vaccine would be successful. But because of the urgency of the pandemic, our leadership made that decision very early on. We operate one of the most sophisticated supply chain systems in the industry, with more than 40 Pfizer-owned sites and more than 200 suppliers globally. Based on this experience, we were confident that we could be prepared to make and distribute a COVID-19 vaccine once authorized or approved. In late July last year, we announced our initial agreement with the US government to supply 100 million doses of our vaccine once authorized or approved. In late December last year, we announced a second agreement, and that was to supply another 100 million doses. And in February this year, the US government agreed to purchase another 100 million doses, bringing the total doses from Pfizer for the US to 300 million. Worldwide, we now believe that we can deliver about 2 to 2.5 billion doses by the end of 2021. So how can we do this? This is based on a number of things. We updated our label to include 6 doses instead of 5 in some countries like the US. We made continuous process improvements, expanded at our current facilities, and we added more suppliers and contract manufacturers to our network. As of this week, I'm pleased to tell you, we've delivered 162 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine
Myron, she's lost audio and she's going to call back in. So I think we may want to.
So we can move on and then we can pop back to Lisa. I'm happy to do that. So while Lisa tries to get back in, maybe, Angel, you can give us a little bit of discussion about what's going on with security and some of the counterfeit issues. You want to go ahead and go ahead?
Sure thing, Myron, and thank you, and thank you to the CUNY leadership and alumni for this opportunity to talk a bit about the security risks surrounding the vaccine. As you can imagine, the most sought out product in the world would also attract the interest of criminal organizations. And to highlight this, I wanted to share with you an incident that occurred a couple of weeks ago in Mexico. In Michoacan, the state of Michoacan, a mobile vaccination unit was being escorted to a municipality in the state of Michoacan to be able to offer these vaccines to the elderly population. During the transportation and escort, a heavily group of armed individuals, believed to be sicarios, attacked this convoy in an attempt to steal the vaccines. Luckily, the Mexican army was present and was able to thwart this attempt and ensure the safe delivery and vaccinations to that particular state. So I think that was a good end story, but what this really highlights is something that we've been very concerned about from the onset of the vaccine, was that criminals first were going to attempt to steal, we're going to attempt to counterfeit, and we're going to attempt to exploit fraudulent schemes to ensure that they were targeting unsuspecting victims globally. And you know, when you look at this level of violence that's being attracted, and in this particular instance, luckily it wasn't a Pfizer vaccine, but it was a vaccine of another country. It really underscores the importance of security and assessing risk from the onset of the development all the way through the supply chain and delivery of the vaccines. What I can say is from a global security within Pfizer perspective, we have been working with the vaccines team from the very beginning to ensure not only the safety of and security of facilities involved in research and development and manufacturing, but also in the integrity of the supply chain from manufacturing point to the actual points of distribution, or in some instances in countries around the world to the points of use. When you look at the pandemic has been such a huge criminal opportunity. They started from counterfeit PPE, fraudulent medical devices, and as certain treatments were made public, they started to look at that and target those treatments. And of course, the ultimate now are the vaccines. It's normally an evolution when you're looking at pharmaceuticals in criminality. And it normally starts off with fraudulent offers. And at the onset, actually before the vaccine was approved for EUA use in the United States and in other markets around the world, we were already observing an uptick of offers on the darknet and the surface net globally, and offering the vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, for any amount of money. And the thing about this, and I think this is a critical takeaway that I want to share with you, is that the vaccines are for free, particularly here in the United States and everywhere else that we've been distributing the vaccines, they are free. So any fraudulent offers or any offers in the internet, through email or through phone calls that offer you the opportunity to take a Pfizer vaccine for a price, it's fraudulent. And once again, we've seen counterfeit products, particularly in Mexico and in Poland, confirmed counterfeits that have been produced and utilized to vaccinate unsuspecting victims in those countries. We've worked closely with law enforcement agencies globally with governments and with the ministries of health to ensure that not only are they aware of the particularities of our vaccines, to ensure that when they do come in contact with something that might be suspected that's counterfeit, to let us know so we can work with them and confirm if it is or not. But also in securing, as I mentioned before, the supply chain. Partnerships have been critical internally in Pfizer and externally with not only, as I mentioned, government officials, but also with the carrier services to ensure the integrity of the supply chain. And one of the things that I did want to highlight, because we've seen it a lot here in the United States, are the financial scams. Particularly the latest was a financial scam related to a COVID-19 vaccination survey. I don't know how many of you have received it, but I've received like 3 or 4 of them to my private email. Pfizer or any of the vaccine manufacturing companies will never send you an unsolicited email, and more so, will never ask for any payment in advance or fees for postage, so you can complete a survey. So that is completely fraudulent. We have worked with the U.S. government to issue a public service announcement regarding that, because we saw that it was becoming such an emerging problem in the U.S. that we needed to put it out there through all the means possible. Criminals will continue to attempt to exploit the vaccines and any other type of treatments that are approved in the future. What you need to know is that regarding the vaccines and in the U.S., you can only receive the vaccines at authorized government vaccination centers. And no vaccine, and I think this is important, no vaccine is being sold online. So if you see any type of online offers for the vaccine, I can tell you right now, it is completely fraudulent. So please, educate those that need to be educated, spread the awareness of the importance that vaccinations are only given in certain places that are designated by the government. And any type of calls, unsolicited emails, or any type of online offers are all fraudulent. Lisa, can I turn it back to you?
I think we've got Lisa Bax, who's going to continue talking about maybe some of the manufacturing and our distribution efforts. Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Angel and Myron. Sorry about that, and thanks for being patient with my technology. So I think my computer was shocked at how many doses we've delivered. So I think I left off telling you that we've now delivered 162 million doses of our vaccine to the U.S. government with a shipment accuracy rate of 99%. And picking up on what Angel was saying, the doses are ordered by all of our partners under the collaboration with the U.S. government and the states. So we get orders from the states, pharmacies, from FEMA, mass vaccination sites, dialysis centers, and several other federal vaccination partners. So given all of the manufacturing process improvements we've been able to make, we've expanded the doses available per week from about 5 million a week to 15 million. And what this allows us to do is to stay on track with our deliveries. And by the end of May, we'll be able to deliver 220 million total doses to the U.S. government, and then the remaining bringing us to a total of 300 million doses by mid-July. And again, I just wanted to underscore the states are doing a good job of allocating the doses. They've now opened up guidelines in all states to allow anyone 16 and over to be vaccinated against COVID-19. And as Angel said, the U.S. government has clarified the vaccine is free in our country. And then what CDC has noted, and I think the president was picking up on this at the start, is that nearly 30% of Americans 18 and older are now fully vaccinated, and over 53% have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. So going forward, we will continue this really close collaboration with the federal government, with the states, and we foresee no issues in delivering on our commitments that we've made to the U.S. government. I just wanted to touch briefly on the storage of our vaccine. I think you've probably heard that it does need to be stored at very cold temperatures to remain viable. And we've worked very, very hard, and we did this ahead of the vaccine rollout to make sure that there's flexibility in vaccine storage. And more recently, we were able to update our label and to allow 2 weeks of storage at regular freezer temperatures. And what this gives providers the ability to do, the states the ability to do, is to manage our vaccine in different settings and also in rural and harder to reach communities. And this is something that we're going to work on in the coming weeks and hopefully make some improvements so that we continue to be as flexible as possible. I know my colleague Melissa is going to talk to you about some of our outreach. I just wanted to flag that vaccine confidence has been such an important part of our effort at Pfizer. And again, we know the vaccine is only effective if people are willing to take it. And so not only have we tried to be transparent in developing the vaccine, and that was through our clinical trial process, but also in every effort around distribution to try to make that information that we have about the safety of the vaccine, the data that we have, make that available and be as transparent as possible. A lot of what we're trying to do is work with community leaders and advocacy organizations, public health officials, policymakers to share as much information as possible on the vaccine and the regulatory process. And we continue to look for ways to support efforts to get the word out. And I think this is a piece of what Melissa will go into. And I feel so proud of my colleagues for all of the work that they're doing. One thing that's been notable as we've reached out and we've tried to really understand what's effective is that we see that messengers really matter. And healthcare professionals continue to play a critical role. They really are at the top of the list of the success of any immunization program, because I think that as vaccinators and trusted sources of vaccine information, they can really provide information effectively and reassure their patients and their communities. So I just want to say thank you. Thanks for your patience with my technical difficulties, but so happy to be here today. Really proud of my colleagues and all the partnerships we've had at the federal and state levels. So Myron and Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, Melissa, let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about some of our efforts related to building vaccine confidence. Melissa?
Thank you, Myron. Thank you, Lisa. And again, thank you to the John Jay School for allowing us to be here to talk about vaccine confidence and about the Pfizer vaccine. The way that we partner, in particular in multicultural communities, in terms of trying to increase vaccine confidence, is that we've partnered through what we call our Pfizer Multicultural Health Equity Collective, which I co-lead. The collective is a cooperative of Pfizer colleagues and US-based organizations focused on achieving health equity across ethnic groups and other underrepresented communities, especially those facing significant health disparities like we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic. So in partnership with these key groups, and these key groups are patient advocacy organizations, healthcare provider organizations, community groups, and legislative caucuses, we've sought to host events like these to give people the correct information. We know that the vaccine is only as effective as those who are willing to take the vaccine. And so we want to give that information to the community, to those trusted voices in the community, so that they have the correct information to give to their constituents so that they can make an educated decision about taking the vaccine. The Multicultural Health Equity Collective, the work is guided by what we call our Pfizer Multicultural Advisory Council. And the Advisory Council was very helpful in last summer as we look at what types of materials to pull together to make sure that our clinical trials were diverse. We work with the 100 Black Men, the NAACP, the National Urban League, Dia de la Mujer Latina, a number of multicultural groups to help us actually diversify in, our clinical trials. And these groups are very helpful in getting the information out. Certainly the NAACP played a big role in New York City. As I said again, some of the organizations that we work with that you may be familiar with is the National Medical Association, the National Hispanic Medical Association, Hispanic Nurses and Black Nurses. Nurse Sandra Lindsay, we were very involved with working with Millicent Gorham with the National Black Nurses Association in terms of educating even our healthcare providers about the safety and efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine. And we know that you all can also be those trusted voices in the community. And we hope that the information that you're hearing this evening will be such that you will go and spread the word to talk about the information that we've shared with you. If you need additional materials, we have those. We have one-pagers, we have infographics, that we can share with you, that you can share with the community so that everyone who is eligible for this vaccine will consider taking it, because we know that we all want to go back to normal at some point in the near future, and we can only do that through making sure that people are vaccinated. I just want you to know that Pfizer is committed to health equity, and as Angel shared with you, the Pfizer vaccine is free. And you should not be asked any, regardless of immigration status or anything like that. The vaccine is free to anyone here in the U.S. And as far as our health equity work, as we talk about that, I just wanted you to know, as you all think about ways to partner with Pfizer, we are open to that. We partner in the areas of advocacy and access with our partners, diversity in clinical trials. Even after the pandemic is over, we will continue to need to diversify our clinical trials. Frankly, that 10% diversity for Blacks, 13% for Hispanics is not the typical diversity we see in a clinical trial. And so we want to make sure that the medicines that we develop work in all populations. And so diversity in clinical trials is the key area to that. We're also working in the areas of social determinants of health, who would think that where you live, your access to a physician would play a part in whether or not you have health equity. Yeah, right. So we're also working in that area. We've given some small grants out to multicultural groups who are working in the area of social determinants of health. And finally, we partner around disease awareness. So we see this presentation as just the first step of continuing the relationship around health equity with John Jay, and certainly would love to continue the discussion around partnering with our Multicultural Health Equity Collective. I'll turn it back over to you, Myron, so that we might take questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of underscore a point that you made, Melissa, and thanks for doing it, and thanks to all of you. But you highlighted that 10 to 13, that the minority participation in trials, 10% African American, 13% Latino. And I wanted, to your point, that's a high number. So that we were very excited that we reached those milestones, because that's higher than we usually are able to achieve in our clinical trials. So I just want to make sure people understood that was a very good thing that we got to those numbers. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up for questions. I know we have someone moderating the questions, and I think we'll go ahead and get started. And we have all of our panelists ready to go and make sure the right one answers the right question.
Wonderful. Dr. El-Mohades and I will tag team on the questions. And just so the audience knows, I'm going to particularly focus on the questions that our experts can answer. We won't be answering questions that are specific to the John Jay community in this forum. We'll get to those later. But there's a question about risks, and are there risks that the public should know about this time, and how? And I'm going to paraphrase that. How would that impact your recommendations about timing of when people should avail themselves of the vaccine?
Sure,
Lisa?
I can take that question. Yeah, absolutely. I can take that question. So it's such a good one. And what I'd really love to point out first is there are 3 great resources available to everybody. The first is your healthcare provider, to talk about the vaccines, to ask questions. There are many materials, they're familiar. These are people at a vaccination center or your personal healthcare provider. So really important to reach out and to talk through for your particular situation, what you need to know. The second, and I mentioned this, is Pfizer has an EUA fact sheet about the vaccine. And this talks about the study and the safety profile. That can be found at cvdvaccine-us.com. And why that's important is it will talk about the safety data, that safety profile, which was very, very good, and there's a lot of great information, and that essentially talks about potential adverse events following vaccination. And what the study found was there is no severe side effect. They did not find that. Nothing rose to that level. And instead, there were a couple more common to be expected. There could be site pain, fatigue, and headache. And those were the most common for people who received the vaccine. But again, I would urge you to take a look at that. It's easy to read and accessible information. And then the final thing, and I find this so helpful, is CDC has put out interim clinical considerations, and this is on all of the COVID vaccines, and they continuously update that. It is very, very straightforward, and that tells you a lot. It includes information about the safety of vaccines. If you have certain conditions, they have guidance on that, and again, it's continually updated. So I hope you can take a look at that, and I think that really gets to the heart of this question.
Ayman, your turn.
Yeah, one of the audience is asking, the vaccine was developed at unprecedented speed, and how can people know that it is fully safe? And attached to that is, what does it mean that it is approved for emergency use? Can you explain that to the lay audience, and how can that change over time? What does that mean exactly?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So in this case, because of the nature and urgency of the pandemic, we were able to compress the usual time frame to be able to develop the vaccine and to work with regulatory authorities. So in normal course, this could take years, because you do these different parts of the process. Certain studies, your consultations with regulatory authorities, you do them in succession. And everything in this case, not to cut corners, but in fact to make sure that there was regular conversation, discussion about what was occurring in the studies, this was continuous. So it was an unprecedented moment. And also unprecedented collaboration with our regulatory authorities. And I have to commend them for the amount of work that they put in with that. And so I think the other piece where we were able to speed this up that no vaccine maker would usually do is we simultaneously made sure that we could actually manufacture the vaccine. Usually you wait. You want to know that the product will be able to gain regulatory approval. So we did those at the same time. That's not the usual course. That would take years to be able to get that right. And I think with emergency use, while this is the first time that that's been used for vaccines in our country, this is an approach where you still get that comprehensive engagement of regulatory authorities. It's just that they want to make sure that the vaccine can also get to people in a time that will really help address, in this case, a pandemic. It doesn't mean that we won't seek regulatory approval. And in fact, we're hoping within the next month we will be able to do so. So we're excited about that, and that would be a full license, the standard, that everybody has come to expect in our country.
Another question was, is there a difference between Moderna and Pfizer?
So they're both mRNA-based. The dosing is slightly different. So we have a 30 microgram dose in each of our 2 doses of the vaccine, and Moderna has a slightly higher dosage, about 100 micrograms. But otherwise, the underlying technology is very, very similar.
So we've got another question about whether or not you need to get a COVID test before receiving the vaccine.
You do not.
That's nice and simple. We want you to get the vaccine, folks.
Another question was about 1% of the Pfizer vaccine is going to low-income countries. How does that work out? And the related question was, would the Pfizer vaccine work against the Indian variant that is involved in this major outbreak in India currently?
Right. So as far as the low-income countries, we are participating in the COVAX facility. So this is that effort globally with Gavi to make sure that we can be a part of that and be able to supply our vaccine. In India, we haven't yet tested the current Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine against that specific variant. But one of the things I had mentioned is in both laboratory studies and in real world evidence in the use of our vaccine in Israel, we've found that it works quite well against the existing variants. And so we feel like that, there's potential with respect to the Indian variant, that I think that's something that's encouraging. And again, the mRNA platform is very adaptable. And I think that's the other part that makes us think that if variants develop in the future, those that we might not have seen yet, that we would be able to work with this mRNA platform quickly, safely, effectively to help address those variants.
I feel like the doctor ought to ask the question about the pregnancy.
Yeah, another question was, and we've heard a lot about that. Is it safe to get vaccinated while pregnant?
Right. And one of the things I think in our initial phase 3 study, so the 46,000 participant study, we did not study specifically pregnant women. And so in February, we did start a separate study. We want to enroll up to 4,000 pregnant women. And I think that as we go forward in that study, it will tell us more. The other thing that I can say is, again, the CDC has prepared this clinical considerations document. It's on their website, and I'm happy to pop that in the chat. But it is so helpful. It talks a lot about pregnancy. It talks about lactating women. And so I would say, again, speak with your healthcare professional, review these documents. I think that there's a lot of really helpful guidance for pregnant and lactating women.
So we've also got some questions coming in by email. There's a question about the children and what the timeline and plan is for vaccinations being available for young people under 16.
Right. Yeah, it's such an exciting area. So a couple of things. We did submit our data for children ages 12 to 15 to be included in our EUA. So FDA is looking at that now. So we're hopeful that we'll get some feedback very soon. And then for children 11 and younger, we have started a clinical study. So we are dosing in studies, under the age of under the age of 12. And then we hope to get a readout from those studies in the second half of the year. So very excited about the science and the progress in that area.
There's a question about whether, so the Johnson & Johnson.
I'll ask a question for my.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Karol.
Okay, so there's a question about fatalities after the administration of the first or the second shot of the Pfizer vaccine?
So there hasn't been any fatality that I'm aware of that is linked to the vaccine. So I'll say that again. So there is no fatality that I'm aware of that is linked to the vaccine. I know that there is some study data that touches on this. And so again, I would refer you to the EUA fact sheet on cvdvaccine-us.com. And then I also believe that the clinical considerations from CDC talk about this area for each vaccine. So where they talk about different risk areas and other aspects of the studies.
Ayman, why don't you, Kate, take the Q&A, because I'm getting some in the chat too. So I'll let you handle the Q&A while I try to monitor the ones coming in on the
we
chat.
just completed a nationwide.
Ayman? Okay, let me ask this one. Are there plans to evaluate the COVID vaccine for people with HIV or otherwise immunosuppressed populations?
Yeah, so it's such a great question. We did include HIV stable people in the large phase 3 trial. There wasn't enough participation so that we could conclusively, draw, something from that and include it in the EUA. So going forward, the Pfizer research team is looking at the immunocompromised, areas and where we might be able to do additional studies. And then again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the clinical considerations that CDC has put up on their website also talk about several of these immunocompromised areas. And I find it very, very helpful. And of course, always talk to your healthcare provider if there's a specific area that you're concerned about.
Ayman, you were asking one, I think.
Yeah, we just completed a study with 6,000 participants, where most of the participants said that their preference is to receive the vaccine at their doctor's office or at the pharmacy. And with the requirements for storage for the Pfizer vaccine, what are you doing to make it more accessible at primary healthcare sites?
I know this is like the top question. And so we're looking at additional stability options at refrigerated temperature, and we're looking at smaller packaging sizes. So, I've explained all of this is in collaboration with the US government. We work with, so many different agencies, but those are things that we're looking at. I think it's such an important area when you think of the pediatric part of the population, making this accessible to pediatricians. So it's a big part of what we're working on. So I hope we have updates in the near term for everybody.
So I've got a question about what happens if someone fails to show up for their second shot.
So there is a window of time, but it's about a 4-day window before, after. Yeah, so there's a 4-day window. So before, after, so you have that 21 days, and you could go 4 days early, 4 days late. And then what the CDC has provided is additional guidance, because they knew that this appointment system, this could be challenging. So you actually have up to 6 weeks. So don't get another first shot. You've got 6 weeks. If you've got Pfizer, you've got Moderna, make sure you get in for that second shot. So the guidance right now is go ahead, don't worry about it, but make sure you get that second shot.
What can you tell us now about how long the vaccine's protection will last, and when or if we'll have to have boosters or annual shots?
Right. The big questions, right? So one of the things in this shorter development process, we didn't have that chance, right, at the time we submitted for EUA to be able to know, well, how long does protection last? Is it, a year? Is it longer? And so just a few weeks ago, we were able to update and publish our data that shows that there is 6 months of protection after you get your 2 shots. So we have studied a number of the participants in the large phase 3 trial. And so going forward, we will stay in touch with all of these participants for 2 years. And that will give us a sense of that true length of the protection, so that duration of immunity. And then on boosters, I told you we're studying a couple of options, so variant specific, a 3rd dose of the existing vaccine. And then what we do is we work directly with the FDA and the CDC when we have that data, which should be sometime this summer. Then we try to understand what's needed, what's happening with the variants, and then the FDA and CDC will lay out those guidelines about a booster. So I would say stay tuned. We should know a lot more this summer and see what the approach is that the U.S. is going to take.
One question, I've heard that comment already several times, is about the effect on fertility and some comments on irregular menstrual cycles after the vaccine.
Yeah, there is no data that shows an harm impact at all on fertility. And again, I think this is an area that CDC is very aware of. They know that there's concern. So I think the 2 strong pieces of advice: talk to your healthcare provider. They will have the latest information. And then again, the CDC is continuously updating their clinical considerations. And this is one of the important issues that everyone is asking about.
There is
questions.
So someone says that they received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine but didn't grow any antibodies. Should they get the Pfizer vaccine?
So my understanding right now is that CDC is not advising that you get different vaccines. And so I think, I know CDC has updated quite a bit of information since they stopped the pause, restarted the J&J vaccine last Friday. So again, I would say keep an eye on that guidance from the CDC. I think they put a lot of additional information out. And it should touch on a lot of those types of questions.
I think there's a question about how long does it take to get final FDA approval? I know you addressed that you were looking.
I know. Right. It's like, yeah, I know. Everyone's like, hurry up. So once an application, so a biologics license application, or we call it BLA, is filed, the FDA has a couple of months to tell you that everything can proceed. So about 2 months, they let you know. And then there's a 6-month review period if we're able to get priority review for this particular vaccine. So if we filed by June, then it would be roughly the first start of 2022 on a normal time frame. So I know everybody has seen FDA has been moving fast this past year, so I think we'll have to see if it's any faster, but that's the usual time frame.
So we want to make sure that the panelists have time for closing comments, and then that Dr. El-Mohades, as our resident public health expert, has some closing comments for our audience. So I wondered if the panelists would just give us your closing thoughts for our audience that we hope that will encourage them to get the vaccine and answer any questions they may have for their family and friends. So Myron, I'll let you I'll let you figure out how to do that with your team.
Myron, I'm happy to go ahead and start.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I just want to say that we know that there is some historical fear out there, but we also know the importance of, especially in New York, the importance of getting vaccinated. So if you need more information to help you make informed decisions, we have that information. We're happy to send that to whoever needs that information. We also want to continue to be a resource to CUNY and to John Jay. And we hope that this is just, again, the beginning of ongoing discussion. Myron?
Yeah, and I mean, and I want to pick up on that point too, and particularly to the president, because in my role, I'm responsible for New York City government relations, and we really are a team. So we look forward to an opportunity to sort of for you all and for others on the call, we open to suggestions because we're really trying to cast, particularly here in New York City, a wide net about trying to educate folks. And as we've seen today, we know there are a lot of questions. And as Lisa says, I mean, we've done several of these and we get a lot of the same questions. And what that has said to me is we still got a lot to do in terms of some of our educating folks in the community, but we welcome that opportunity because we know it's important. Because again, it's not the vaccines alone, it's the vaccinations that's going to make a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Myron, to pick up on that, I think one of the things that we've all seen, trying to get this information out is that it also matters who you talk to. And I think I would just encourage people, talk to those you trust. I think that is the critical piece. It could be your pastor. It could be your nurse. Nurse Lindsay was a huge inspiration to me and my family. It can be your own healthcare provider. And I think it's so important to make sure that you're doing that and you're talking to those you trust, because the information is out there and we want to be a part of that. But I think that those trusted people in your lives, make sure you're checking in. I think that that's so important in this, and I really think it makes a difference.
And I want to go back to something, and Hal sort of talked about some of the counterfeits and some of the scams. Luckily now that a lot of the vaccine centers are pretty much open to everyone, this problem is diminished. But again, the scammers, the counterfeiters are busy looking for new ways and innovative ways to beat the system. One of the things that we heard in New York City when we were still doing the tiered system is that folks were selling spaces in line, that there were calls going around for people like, do you want to I can set for this price, I can make sure you go to the front of the line. So one of the things as folks on the call, as you're talking to your families, as you're talking to your friends, and you hear things, make sure, going back to his point, the vaccines are free. They're only at designated centers, which is easily verifiable through a variety of sources, through federal government, through local government, through city government. Just make sure, I think for all of us, as someone who has elderly family members who call me, and I don't want anybody on this call to dispel this because my family members give me credit for discovering the vaccine and I've accepted that credit. But I get calls all the time from my family members and I get asked really unusual questions too. So it's just, I am really concerned, particularly for our elderly population, because what I found in my family is they're very frightened. And so they are, they get these calls and people tell them anything and they believe it. On the reverse of that, the younger folks in my family, they believe every meme they see on social media. And so we have to be very careful there too. So we're fighting social media, we're fighting history, we're fighting a variety of things. So for those of us that are really care about our communities, we have to be vigilant in our efforts.
Myron, and I just wanted to add, right, I just wanted to ensure that we're working round the clock, as I indicated before, collaborating with government agencies globally, and particularly here in the United States, to ensure the integrity of the supply chain. We've worked aggressively with law enforcement to disrupt any type of criminal activity that we've been able to identify, and also provide support to law enforcement agencies when they've identified criminal activity, be it support in laboratory support or forensic support as well. Education and awareness, and I think that this goes to everything that we've been talking, is the most important tool to be able to convey to our family members, to our friends that this is happening, and be aware, because you don't want them to fall victims of criminal activity. So I kindly ask you, take the information that we provided, read, look up online. There's a lot of information regarding these fraudulent scams and this type of criminal activity. And please make your family members and friends aware that this is happening. As I mentioned before, I've been the recipient of several of these emails, and luckily I know, but we received numerous phone calls into the company about people falling prey to these type of fraudulent offers.
Thank you. Marcus, you get the final Pfizer word.
Thank you, President Mason. So what I will say is, first, I thank all my Pfizer colleagues. Of course, again, thank John Jay and CUNY for their participation, but I also want to give a special shout out to the orchestra kit, those folks who were responsible for putting the program together. We have Jennifer on the John Jay side, Mindy on the John Jay side. You have Lynn Ross, John Blakey. These programs do not just come together. There are folks working really, really hard to make it happen. And then finally, as an alumnus to John Jay, I would especially want to talk to the students because as young people, you think that you're invincible, and you're not. There are young people dying from the virus, or young people getting sick. And more importantly, if you love grandma, if you love grandpa, if you love mom, you love dad, get vaccinated, because you are helping to save them and protect them. So with that, again, I want to say thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to partner with John Jay and share some of this helpful information as we continue to fight this pandemic.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcus. Dr. El-Mohades.
This is a moment in the history of the pandemic. 50% of adults in the United States have received the vaccine, received at least one dose of the vaccine. On the other hand, the CDC is reporting a decline in the number of shots received. Only in the past month, the numbers have decreased from 3.1 million per day to 1.9 million doses administered per day. We really need to activate our community to stand behind the concept of us being responsible, not just for ourselves, but also for our families, for our communities, and for our nation. This is a pivotal moment where transparency is required. Thank you, Lisa, today for all the information you gave. And I think in the long run, we'll continue to hope that you will share with us safety information over time. Confidence is important. The sense of transparency and trust is essential. We are here to answer your questions. Convince USA at the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health, our partnership with John Jay is intended to move to the next phase, closer to the herd immunity that is required to save us from this scourge and take us back to normalcy. Thank you for the panelists today. Thank you, Karol, so much for inviting me. Thank you, Richard, for the great information and the support and the motivation that you're giving to the CUNY community. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. And I hope that our audience and who have stayed with us for this entire program, I hope you understand how seriously we take your health and how important your health and your family's health is to all of us, because we are all a community together. And I can't thank the Pfizer team enough for coming to educate us about this vaccine and about how this works, and for caring about our health and doing this in record time, but maintaining the integrity and the rigor in developing this vaccine. We should all take it. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Marcus, for being so connected to us. Myron, we will stay connected to you. And so we will continue to post information on our website and on the CUNY website so that everyone understands that we are here to support you in answering your questions and your family's questions. And Dr. El-Mohades, he continues to answer my text at any time of night when I've got a question. We are so fortunate to have you as our resident public health expert. And I will tell you that he is personally, I consider Dr. El-Mohades to be a brother. And he has always been available to me, and I will continue to use that lifeline. I don't even know if that game show still exists. The lifeline called Dr. El-Mohades to answer our questions, because this is complicated. The facts are complicated, but we're all here to support you and get you the answers you need so that you feel comfortable protecting yourselves and your families, because we all want to come back together. We all want to have the ability to hug each other again and share in the joys and celebrations of being part of this wonderful John Jay community. And I have got to thank Jennifer, Mindy, Lynn, and where'd he go? John Blakey for putting together a fabulous program. So thanks to everyone for making this such a success in getting information out to our community. And we will continue to share that information. And Myron, we are going to take you up on your offer to be partners with us in across CUNY to make sure that everyone gets this information and gets vaccinated. So thanks, everybody.